Hello, and welcome to our DO Live 9 p.m. broadcast. And our theme for this week is puzzle game design and the witness. And today we are looking at pedagogy and pacing. And for a lot of sort of normal puzzle games, well, we're actually going to compare a lot of different kinds of puzzle games to try to figure out how much the open world design of the witness helps and hurts, the player experience or whatever they're trying to do. And right now I just got my PS4 capture card linked to work, so this is the first time I've done this on stream. It looks pretty good. Let me know the audio if there's any problem there, but there's a lot of things I want to consider. So here, one of the basic ideas, pedagogy, is how the game teaches you. Alright, here. So far in this series, we've talked about a lot of topics, and I'm kind of working them together in a little map that you can kind of see down here. But started off with just considering what a puzzle game was. We created this sort of spread for different types of puzzle games that you might encounter, from jigsaw puzzle to things like Sudoku to things like games like Braid, and the witness falls on the Braid end of things. We talked about a little bit about honest puzzle game design, and we talked about meaningful experiences solving puzzles. And one of the things that's being talked about with the witness is that it's amazing that what's valuable about these experiences is you actually coming up with the solutions yourself. And I don't know who lied to a bunch of people, right? Like who tricked gamers into thinking that wasn't the case, but I don't know how you can not understand that the joy of solving a puzzle or playing and engaging with the puzzle is solving it yourself. Like, I do not understand at what point that became a mystery to us, but it's cool that people are kind of learning that all over again, and we're seeing some of the results in the way people talk about the witness. We're here doing a deep dive, and we're going to really come in assuming that puzzle games are interesting, assuming that we already knew that what makes puzzle games interesting is how you figure them out, how you wrap your brain around the various challenges. We're going to assume that all that's a given, and we're going to now consider, compared to many other puzzle games, how does the witness convey the ideas about how the game system works, and what can be said about the progression of puzzle challenges that they present in the witness, including how varied they are within a certain set, within a certain theme, within a certain area, and then how the progression of those ideas helps or hurts. I want to turn down the music a little bit. Yeah, so this is some of the topics. We listened to a lot of different criticism on the 3 p.m. radio show, and these are a lot of the ideas that we pulled out. A lot of these pertain to feedback. You see this little purple color here is feedback on our color-coded scale, and feedback is really important both to how players learn, and in this case it's a really important thing to how players find fun in these games, because if all the clues and the rules were too obfuscated, if you just really couldn't figure out what's going on, then that's kind of a problem in and of itself. That's sort of unrelated to the ideas that the game's trying to convey. Also, a little bit with level design, we see this dark red color, and it's this difficulty design, and topics like trial and error and how to use reprises, sequences, and tutorials as tutorials is a really interesting sort of connected idea. So we'll touch on a few of those as we continue our exploration, looking at the witness and its level design. So I'll put a note here. Non-verbal communication. So, one of the interesting ways that I think David Sirlin helped popularize when talking about the fighting games is that it's like having a conversation between you and your opponent. So, completely without words, in explicit language, you are communicating with your opponents things that you can do, things that you think, things that you know, things that you expect just with your quote-unquote body language when you're playing fighting games, at least at a high level or medium level even. and that was a really interesting idea that a lot of people latched onto. But essentially that just supports the idea that in games in general, actions are a valid way to communicate ideas, and a series of challenges that require the player to do a series of actions is another way, in a very similar way, to convey ideas. So this is nothing new to video games. This is nothing new to how puzzle games work. And even though sometimes it's be hard to describe exactly what it's communicating, that's kind of life, right? Like, I don't know if there are too many things that people have an easy time communicating about, even if it's common human experiences. Words are tricky in and of themselves, so I never underestimate the power of words and how difficult it is to communicate through any medium or any method. So we're going into this discussion, this investigation, assuming that, yeah, games already convey ideas through their interactivity and their gameplay alone, not just their text-based content. And here's another thing that we're going to not assume, right? That all communication, or we have no bias for communication types, mediums. So like whether or not a game communicates via text, whether or not a game communicates via interactive tutorials, whether or not a game communicates via pictures, we just look at it for face value and we just consider the effectiveness of that communication and what the game is trying to convey, and we just take it all as sort of a one potential method of many that games try to communicate what they're trying to do. So we know for a fact that Braid used, like, so this is kind of a thing that happened, I'm going to say 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even not that far back, but at one point, sort of the critical gaming discourse got obsessed with this idea of Super Metroid. And they're like, look at Super Metroid, it teaches so much without explicitly creating tutorials or using text blocks or anything, right? Like, all games need to do this. 1, all games don't. 2, Super Metroid's a relatively simple game. You just move around and shoot stuff, right? It's not that complicated compared to any fighting game, any strategy game, any RPG even, where so many of the systems and rules inside RPGs are more abstract. They have less obvious feedback, and how they interact is less easy to understand. So, like, as we always say, you can get away with that kind of thing when the game's a lot easier to parse just visually and a lot easier to understand. And Super Metroid does that. You kind of move around, you use your map, you figure out where to go. Like, that's really great. You be observant, you can find a lot of stuff. There's secrets all over the place, but even sticking to a nonverbal communication style, Super Metroid, a lot of people didn't know how to wall jump, a lot of people didn't know how to bomb jump, or not bomb jump, or the super run and jump, and all the different diagonals and all the tricks. There's still so much more to know. And so another important consideration when we're talking about what games teach and how they work is, well, what do we need to know? Do we need to know just enough to get by? Do we need to know just enough to beat the boss? And from there, there's all these different levels of skill and style and execution and secrets and optional challenges that we can consider. And not only, like, can you overcome the challenge, but how you overcome the challenges and is an important consideration, because you can cheese a lot of bosses in a lot of single-player games, but there are so many more interesting things that you can experience, so many things you can go back and try and test, and so many ways to play and express yourself that just goes beyond the mere fact that you understand the basic moves and mechanics that you have and what they do. So there's a huge consideration when we're talking about how games teach and what they do. And really, depending on what you're trying to teach, verbal communication may be the best option by far. Like, by far. It depends on how abstract the thing is. It depends on how easy it is for players to sort of get hands-on and get exposure to and see it for themselves. But sometimes you just need to explain something, because there's no better way to convey an idea than through words. There's lots of little tips in Smash Bros. Let me see if I can pull up a Smash for loading screen tip. I'll show you the screenshot for Smash 4. There's these tips that they pop up during the loading screen, and which is really cool. Let me do this. Yeah, they look like this, and these appear in every time the game's loading up a level, whatever. And they give you just one though, and they teach you lots of things about the game. And this first one, if the Phantom from Zelda's Phantom Slash takes 13% damage or more, he'll be destroyed. After that, you'll have to wait 6 seconds before summoning him again. Now, you could take this information and like draw a comic book and draw a comic of Zelda shooting off the Phantom getting hit, like a little percentage at the bottom that shows 13% damage, and then an explosion, and then you have to like show a timer, and it goes for 6 seconds. You're like, that's a lot of extra work. Or different work, but it's a lot of pictures that you would need to convey that when 2 sentences gets the job done here in a really compact way. If you wanted to do that in an interactive thing, you'd have to, you know, have a sequence where the Phantom takes 12 damage and stays alive, and show that somehow that the damage it's going to take next is stronger, at least 13 damage. And then you have to sort of put the player in a situation where they can really see without too much ambiguity and without too much hassle what's going to happen next. And you know what? That's a lot of work. And you just really want to know how the Phantom works. And in this case, and many other cases, words work best. But in The Witness, Jonathan Blow and really is against verbal communication. He really likes this idea that what happens in your mind and that silent language that you develop of your own thoughts is a really pure thing. It's a really interesting thing to maintain. It's a really interesting thing to frame in his game. And he went like 100% in this idea of sort of non-wasteful purity, minimalist, non-verbal communication. So maybe I'll write all this down so we don't forget. These are words that often are used to talk about The Witness. So if you search any of these on designoriented.net, you'll also come up to the same interviews and articles that I read. So like, I'm not making this up. Minimalism, non-verbal, no filler. These are words that are often used to describe. But, you know, and it's really cool that Jonathan Blow can recognize something he likes, recognize the design pros and cons of it, and design around it. But it's not, by far, it is definitely not the only way to go. It is perhaps not even the most effective way, but it's kind of what he wanted to design around. So we can take that and kind of roll with it. But just keep in the back of your mind, keep in mind your mind the pros and cons of that, and maybe consider that as an interesting way to understand what's happening in The Witness. Oh, lesson 5. Hey. Oh, this is, yeah, we're just getting rolling on the stream. This is like the second day I started doing the stream consistently. I tried to tweet out a lot of things, but, you know, it's hard trying to do the stream layout and then get my capture card to work and then set up the stream and then talk to people online, but we'll get the hang of it. I'm glad you're here. If you have any questions, this is supposed to be more of a open conversational kind of thing where we actually investigate the game in front of us, and because we listen to all the game's criticism that we can handle at the 3 p.m. 3 p.m. Central Time DO radio, that's what we call it. And now this is the DO live, where we just talk live and we work through issues and try to get down to the bottom of a lot of this. So it looks like my Picross 3D soundtrack right now. Let's go back one. Oh. Picross. Get some more music. Let's try Picross, Pokemon Picross. Why not? If you have any suggestions for music too, let me know. If you got a puzzle game that you like the soundtrack for, definitely would love to throw it up. Just put it in the background. And let me know if the music is ever too loud. I mean, I know the music in The Witness is just so overbearing, it's just gonna, you know, overshadow the entire stream audio, but we're gonna have to deal with that. Okay, so we're looking at, so what was I saying? Yeah, minimalism, we're talking about nonverbal communication. And the thing with The Witness is you wanted to build up this idea in your head, so you have these particular aha moments. And I think there's an undercurrent in a lot of what people are talking about with The Witness, because they're kind of copying what Jonathan Blow says. And from what I can tell, after listening to hours and hours of interviews with Jonathan Blow, he really feels that when video games give you verbal communication, it really just has a much stronger and curbing effect on the learner than non-verbal means like this, right? Where if you say something in words, somehow those words are what the player is going to latch onto, and it like basically drowns out their inner voice. I think that's one of the best ways that I can explain it. So we opt for a series of panels like this in these very sequential areas. And one thing I said in my series, linearity. Oh, no. I wrote a series on complexity. And I talked about the nature of depth that comes from complexity, and then complexity that comes from a type of simplicity in this long article series. And one thing that I conclude in that is that linearity is kind of really important when you're talking about teaching, when you're talking about conveying an idea, because that linearity is sort of essential for us to, maybe we can only listen linearly, we can only think linearly for the most part. And having that information stream come in a very specific, ordered way like that really helps us organize the thoughts and sort of work the concept into our brain. And so linearity, no matter how you look at it, it's kind of a very important concept when we're talking about level design and pedagogy. And Jonathan Blow has these sections like this in the game where he creates a sequence of challenges, and you're supposed to use them as a progression in order to extrapolate the rules by testing your hypothesis and so on and so forth. This is nothing new to gaming. Unless the game is really simple, you should always be curious about what's happening, observant, testing your hypothesis, and looking back at what you've done and trying to get a more accurate model of how the game works in your head. I saw about 6 or so hours of gameplay. So Lesson Pi says, the way it teaches is awesome, very simple game ideas, but it compounds them to become complex and challenging. Yeah, so that's one of my favorite aspects of almost all puzzle games that I play, right? They always have, compared to other genres, comparatively few mechanics, comparatively few rules, comparatively few elements, and then they just build hundreds of levels off of that. And then at some point in there, it gets really challenging. Somewhere in there, you break in your ability to sort of sit there and work them all out, and I think that's one of my favorite parts. Sometimes I really love the smooth progression curve, because you get to sort of be self-aware of the exact moment when your brain goes, I can't handle this, instead of like, this is so easy, and it just flips to, I can't handle this. I think that's really cool, because there's obviously a reason why you can't handle it, and that just starts a whole sort of self-reflective, introspective, metacognitive sort of look, and that's one of the main reasons why I appreciate puzzle games so much. But overall, this game is very similar to just about every other puzzle game that I've played. There's so many different kinds, but so many puzzle games that I've played do exactly what Jonathan Blow does in Witness, down to even barely describing how their game works, or even when they do describe it in text, their games are so simple that there's really not much to explain. Jonathan Blow just takes it to the extreme, I think, and has almost no text in the entire game to read. He almost didn't even want to put subtitles on the audio recordings, and I'm so glad he did, because that would have been a big mistake not to. Sometimes audio and accents and listening to a recording is just super hard to do in general, at least for me. So I like getting that extra feedback from the text. But yeah, so stuff like this. Simple progression of ideas. You do it wrong, you get your feedback, it flashes. You do it right, you get your nice sound effects, you move on. When you play this game for the first time, I think it moves you on automatically, so you can just kind of roll with it. This one you can do like that, and if it moves you on, you might go back and be like, well, does this one work too? And you're like, okay, how about this one? No, and then the freedom to reactivate and play any puzzle is very essential for experimentation is very essential for working out this stuff. And then you can like try like this, and like that one also works. You can try to do crazy stuff. But this one only has one solution. So on and so forth, right? So yeah, I mean, that is what we expect from just about every puzzle game. Start off easy and then get hard. And then hopefully, because the game elements are so few, that we always want our puzzle game designers to sort of take it to the max level within reason. We want them to really go something hard and challenging and complex, like not super hard, like not Rubik's Cube hard, but we really want to typically want our designers to exhaust the ideas, and that's something that Jonathan Blow talks about with Braid often. Here, let me show the articles I was talking about right here. I wrote a series on linearity and emergence. You can just type in linear and Richard into designoriented.net and get all my articles. You can see that they're focused on level design and systems and rules, these two things put together. That's the topic, but the series I wrote on complexity, that one's interesting because it says some things about how we learn and how we, let's say, simplicity from complexity. I'll type in complex. Back to the game for now. So to me personally, like, I don't know, after doing all these different hobbies growing up, you know, soccer, sports, piano, violin, art, dance, choir, science, like, you know, different robotics things, different computer camps, like every single thing, it's, you know, noodling around with programming and like self-teaching with game design and web design and all these different things, right? Various arts and crafts, origami. I don't underestimate how complicated things are nowadays, and I assume that things are going to take a lot of work even when they look simple. And at the same time, I have a growing appreciation of instruction, like clear instruction, good teachers, and how effective teaching can actually be for sort of refining and accelerating a learning process. So no matter what the method is, I think I have a great appreciation for whatever method people choose. I also have an appreciation for various methods, and I have, in the back of my mind, I just think it's better for people to be more receptive to different teaching styles than to just like be stubborn and only think they can be taught one way. Like, obviously, as a learner, if you have more and more styles that you're comfortable with, you can do more and more things and just sort of adapt in more learning environments. But, you know, if you only have one, at least you have one, so be grateful for that. But here in the results, this is a series, Complex. So I wrote the series called Complexity from Simplicity, and I wrote a series called Depth from Complexity right here. So this is a 3-part series, and the other one's a 5-part series. It just really talks about how simplicity and depth are really similar in a weird way, you know, in a non-symmetrical way, but it's weird how they have this interesting relationship. And I talked a little bit about execution and how it's related to depth, right? And your understanding of a game is reflected through how you can interact. In a lot of action-based games, a lot of people think Twitch is sort of like a brain-dead, mind-numbing thing for young gamers with great reflexes, but there's a lot more to it than that. I've read, so like even just this series alone, I've written 22,000 words on it. If you just read all these articles right here, so there's a lot to say. Yeah, I wrote a whole cluster of them right here, and then I wrote a cluster of them back here. Talking about all these different things. Interesting. So yeah, back to the game. So I like, to me, whether Jonathan Blow did this with some verbal instruction or none, like, it's not that big of a deal to me, but that he went so 100% in one style is pretty cool, at least for consistency. I love figuring things out and testing my hypothesis anyway, so this is just comfortable territory for me. And a lot of people who wrote critiques about The Witness is not comfortable territory. And even people like Super Bunny Hops, Jordan Weedman said something like, the game doesn't make sure that you learn a concept before moving on. I'm like, the games can never make sure you can learn a concept before moving on. If you know anything about teaching, like, you can never just 100% make sure somebody knows something. You can like get really close and you can test them for specific bits of knowledge, but ultimately the responsibility of learning something's on the learner, and they can create blocks even for the most straightforward types of tutorials, or they can be really receptive to even the loosest type of instructions. Like, it's all over the board. But one thing you should realize is that if you don't know something, you should probably go back and review it, and that's something we should have all gotten used to in school, or just trying to figure things out on our own in life. Here's another tutorial section that teaches you the black dots, right? You can see here, we got some of the level design elements from the witness and the game breakdown, so you can refresh your memory if you don't remember. But as you can see right here, hexagon dots, some people call them black dots, or connect the dots, whatever, but you can see those here. And so I wonder how many of these just straight tutorial sections there might be in the witness. I kind of want to make a map. That would be kind of complicated. Can I even pull that off right now? Because, okay, so some people call... I'm going to take a few notes so we don't get lost. There's these linear tutorial sections where Jonathan Blow essentially explains things out via examples instead of via words. Linear tutorial.